Okay, perfect. Yeah, welcome everyone. So the webinar will be about the call for proposals. Thanks first of all to all the panelists. So the panelists that have joined us today, they are all running OED funded projects this year. So we have Anne Njeri from Kenya. She's running a project in Kenya and currently based in the UK. We have Michelle Gerbaldi, who has run lots of projects for the OED over the years. She is based in France and has been running projects in Africa. Then Salman Hamid is joining us from the US. He's running a project with his collaborators in Pakistan. And then the last person on the panel is Yasmin, who is running a project in Chile with her colleagues while she herself is based in the US. And finally, also, hello and welcome to my colleague from the OAD, Tawanda, who's a development economist here. So I'll just give a quick run through of what you can expect from the session. This is the agenda for today. We'll have a very quick overview of the OED itself, and then Tawanda will give an introduction to development and astronomy for development. Then I'll take over. I'll talk about the call for proposals, the process, some of the common challenges that applicants have faced in the past, and what are the things that can trip you up in the application. And then we'll move on to the panel discussion with the project leaders that have joined us today. So very, very quick introduction to the OED. If you didn't know already, the Office of Astronomy for Development is based in Cape Town, South Africa. We are a partnership between the International Astronomical Union and the South African National Research Foundation. The mission of our office is to benefit society, to create benefits for society using astronomy. So the astronomy for development. We are not in the business of promoting astronomy or creating more astronomers, although that happens sometimes in the pursuit of development, but that itself, promoting astronomy itself is not our mission. It's not our primary goal. Every year we run this call for proposals, basically an open application, inviting ideas from people around the world on astronomy for development. So this year we are following the two-stage process of the call. We're currently open and accepting applications for stage 1. The deadline is the 31st of May. So that's where we are at. I will actually hand it over to Tawanda now to talk about development and astronomy for development. Tawanda, do you want me to share the screen, or do you have your
yeah, if possible, you can also share the screen, Ram.
Okay, I'll do that. Yeah, thanks. You can go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Ram. If you can just go to the next slide, please. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. So I'm here really to just talk about the concept of astronomy for development. So at the OAD, we developed a course called Introduction to Development Economics for Non-Social Scientists, really just to paint the development context a bit broader, for people who might not necessarily be development professionals. So here I'm just here to just summarize a few excerpts from that course to link it to some of the work that we are doing at the OAD. So astronomy is a science, but its development impact is more difficult to discern when you compare to other sciences, for example. But even in other sciences, causation linked to development is not always clear. But maybe we can talk about association. If you can go to the next slide, please, Ram. Right, so we got this picture from a work by Magnus in 2018. So on the vertical axis, we are showing the growth in the number of American Statistical Association sections, whereas on the horizontal axis, you can see the timeline. So you can see that as we have more of these sections, which should translate to having more statisticians, having more scientists, it's associated with these breakthroughs in statistical computing, for example, around the 1970s. You can see around about 2010, you see this boom in learning in data science. Closer to 2020, you see these innovations and breakthroughs in medical devices and genome sequencing and things like that. So as we have more scientists, as we do more and more science, we are sooner or later bound to come across all these important achievements and milestones which are important for humanity, which are important for development. If you can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so I want to talk about a very important concept, which is the basic economic problem, because I want to talk about the development challenges that the world faces. So economics is the study of social science that is guiding in the allocation of scarce resources to meet unlimited needs and wants. So that's where we have got our basic economic problem, because our resources are finite, but our needs and wants are unlimited. So that is our basic economic problem. So we've got the problem of scarcity, we've got the problem of opportunity cost, and we have to choose amongst competing alternatives. So choice is also a very, important problem, in economics, which brings us to the concept of the production possibilities frontier, PPF. If you can go to the next slide, please, Ram. So this picture here for me is really important because it demonstrates the importance of science. It demonstrates the importance of technology. So we assume in economics a simple economy that can produce two goods, either personalized care units or non-personalized care units. This could be whatever you can think of. On the vertical axis, we can have houses. On the horizontal axis, we can have, for example, hospitals. So, okay, thank you very much. It's noted. I'll go a bit slower now. So we are hypothesizing that in any economy, we can only produce two goods, X and Y, right? And the combinations of these goods that we can produce are here, they lie here on the boundary. We can produce at point A, we can produce at point B, depending on our preferences, depending on our choice. So this is sort of our limitation in terms of how much we can produce, how much housing we can provide, how much healthcare we can provide, how much education we can provide. But thankfully, if we have a technological advancement, we can see this frontier shifting outwards, which then takes us to a higher level of development, which then takes us to a higher level of production, to a higher level of output, and to a higher level of human development. So science and technology is important. It is the only thing that can actually help us stretch this boundary so that we can produce more and we can better, development outcomes. Next slide, please, Ram. Right. So it's important to improve the quality of labor also if you want to, achieve, development. So technology, while it is important, the quality of labor is also important because the simple production function is Q equals K plus L, where K is capital and L equals labor. So STEM investments allow producing more per labor unit than previously, thereby raising output and income. So why do I talk about this? Because the majority of OAD projects which have funded in the past have had a strong education component. So education is very important for development. If you can train people, if you can train high school students, if you can encourage them to venture into STEM, in the long term, we're going to see an increase in national output. We're going to see an increase in production and increase in development. The next slide, please, Ram. Right. So there's an important concept which I think it's important to discuss, because what happens is that we receive applications from different parts of the world, from different geographies. So what happens when you compare developed countries versus developing countries, for example? In the developed world, we've got capital abundance, whereas in developing countries, we've got low capital abundance. So a similar project might work in a developing country context, and it might not necessarily work in a developed country context. So, for example, if your project is domiciled in a small village, for example, it doesn't matter that it has to be a very, very huge project, because under those circumstances, in that context, a small improvement in whatever outcomes we're looking at can actually be very, very important. So this is just what I just wanted to simply talk about. If you can move on to the next slide, Ram. Right. So for example, let's talk about an astrotourism project, right? So if you are, you don't have to say you're coming from a developing country context where income, is low relative to other areas of the world, and the project that you're proposing will generate, for example, just maybe 10,000 or maybe just 1,000 revenue. But if you look at the conditions in that particular, locality, the average income is maybe, for example, $2,000 US. So you see that although this astrotourism revenue might appear, little, but compared to the local condition, it's actually a lot of money. So that project will be very welcome, and it can actually have a very high chance of, of succeeding. If you can go to the next slide, please, Ram. Right. So I still want to talk about development challenges, and I want to raise an important issue which we call market failure. Because many potential, OAD or science projects may aim to address, some of these failings of the market and actually result in some change. If you can go to the next slide, please, Ram. Right. So many development challenges are linked to market failure, as I said. For example, if you look at hunger, right, you see there are people throwing away food, right, in one area. Yet in another area, people might actually be going hungry, dying of hunger and starvation. Why is it like that? Because there is no efficient mechanism to get excess food to the needy, due to, number one, the friction that is imposed by distance and borders. Number two, lack of awareness, no information. Okay, let me try to start my video now. Okay, I think you can see me now, right? So we are saying, if we have a situation where we with lack of awareness, no information, you're not sure, you don't have any information that your neighbor is going hungry, maybe your neighboring country, the neighboring district, or just your neighboring house, because there's no information. So people next door can actually go hungry, whereas you might be throwing away food. So they just need for a mechanism that makes information available. That could be an app that can be programmed, for example. So if you look at an example, food banks, for example, yeah, if you look at food banks, they've been an example of a response to address hunger in some parts of the world. So this is just an example. You can go to the next slide, please, Ram. Let's look at pollution, for example. Why do we have pollution? All this pollution, it's because we've got the existence of positive and negative externalities. So externalities are essentially third-party effects, right? Whereby a mining company, for example, can go into an area, they can mine and make the profit, but it is the society, the community around that mining area that suffers the water pollution, for example, downstream, right? And all those costs, they are not being entirely absorbed by this mining entity. So because of that, people can continue to pollute because they know that they're not going to carry all the costs. So these are negative externalities in that case. So what we can do, for example, as scientists, for example, can develop, for example, monitoring sensors, which can monitor, for example, the behavior of large, multinational corporates, for example. If we talk about positive externalities, we can talk about an observatory, for example, which is located in a particular area. It can actually help by mentoring maybe students at a nearby high school by, providing simple technologies or simple sort of motivation to maybe students in the surrounding community. So those would be positive externalities. So I think for us as scientists, a project can try and maybe maximize any positive externalities and try to minimize negative externalities. If you can go to the next slide, please, Ram. So if you look at poor public health, for example, why do we have poor public health, right? Because public health is a public good, right? So unless one can privatize consumption, there is no incentive to invest, right? Let's look at the medicines, the pharmaceutical market, for example. Many medicines are out of reach for many due to their price. This is because the pharmaceutical market has got many buyers, but very few sellers. So we can characterize it as an oligopoly market. Next slide, please, Ron. Right, so oligopoly market is a type of imperfect competition, right? Where okay, so it's an example of imperfect competition. The opposite we want is perfect competition, where the firm is a price taker. If you look at a vegetable market, for example, everyone knows where we are getting the carrots. Everyone knows where we are getting the lettuce, right? So every firm, every participant is a price taker. Whereas a pharmaceutical firm can actually be a price giver. They dictate the price because there is no information in terms of what is the formula for the vaccine, what is the formula for this piece of equipment, what is the formula for this and that. So if you can go to the next slide, please, Ram. So, so imperfect markets like the pharmaceutical market, for example, they exist because there are barriers to entry. There's no knowledge, right? There's very high regulation and there's very high startup costs, right? So as a result, we've got very few or single sellers and many buyers. And these few sellers tend to overcharge and overprice. The firm is a price giver, as I've just said, and there's no information in terms of what is the formula to make this important, critical piece of equipment or or type of medicine. If you can go to the next slide, please, Ram. So I think I've talked about the pharmaceutical sector, for example, very high drug prices, which leads to avoidable deaths and sickness, for example, particularly in developing countries, also in context of the COVID-19 pandemic that we are all, currently, going through. Next slide, please, Ram. But thankfully, this is an important example which I wanted to highlight, right? So what can I say? These life-saving, equipment, ventilators, for example, right? It's not perfect competition. These markets are monopolized and we've got very high prices. But we've seen during this pandemic, scientists, teaming up with corporates or maybe research groups and, trying to help serve humanity by breaking those information barriers, trying to investigate how can we make, cost-effective and, efficient, ventilators. So this is an example of, science in action. So an OAD project, for example, can aim to do something like this, to break down some of these barriers, to break down some of these constraints in ensuring that people can access, good health, can access food and other, needs and wants. The next slide, please, Ram. Right, so let's talk about poor governance, for example. So in developing countries, sometimes it can be difficult to make politicians accountable, right? Because people, for example, do not have electricity, they don't have internet, so it's difficult for them to fact check things, for example, right? But so as a result, we may find that outcomes may be socially suboptimal, politicians can steal resources, for example, and no one can notice what's happening because nobody, for example, has got any network to check what's happening. So, for example, a simple innovation may be just to install solar panels in a village to address this, problem of whereby people or villagers don't have information, don't have access to information, access to electricity, for example. Next slide, please, Ram. So this was also a very good example. So, I'm sure everyone knows what unemployment is. So frictional unemployment is whereby it is the unemployment that one experiences as they change from one job to another, right? So when you change a job, you are looking for, for an opening somewhere, and you have to be the best sort of, fit, candidate, right? But many times people stay unemployed, but there is an employer somewhere who actually requires the exact skill set that particular unemployed person have, but there's no information. There's information asymmetry. The employer is not sure whether this is really the right candidate that they want. But through application programming, for example, we can better match candidates to jobs and reduce unemployment. Next slide, please, Ram. So this is also another, good example, I think, which is relevant to our current context, whereby you've got all this vaccine hesitancy. So part of the problem is that this vaccine hesitancy is propagated by fake news, right? But I think as people who are trying to understand and unpack this problem, we need to also understand that it has got some theoretical foundation. So me at the OAD, that's sort of, that's the sort of perspective from which I sort of try and come in, sort of unpack some of these theoretical foundations. So in Professor Ekalov's seminal work on information marketry, the paper is called the market for lemons. So a lemon is a second-hand vehicle, right? So when you buy a second-hand vehicle, it is the seller who has got all the ultimate information regarding the condition of that particular vehicle, whereas the buyer can only have some bit of information, not the entire information. So I find that society, communities might be thinking that the governments, these big corporates, all the time have got some hidden information that they are not sort of, ensuring that we also have access to that kind of information. So because of that, we might find some of these, some of these vaccine hesitancy. But I guess maybe as a project, for example, can try and inspire confidence in communities to say, guys, can we go and get vaccinated? Because these things are safe. Because scientists sometimes can, for example, can actually be role models in the communities in which they are in which they come from. So this is just a couple of examples, a couple of scenarios, just to sort of try and link astronomy to development. But really, the sky is the limit in terms of how we can think around these things and how we can go around these things. Thank you very much for paying attention. I'll end here, and Ram, you can take over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tawanda. So that was a very, very, very short introduction to development and astronomy for development. For those interested, we do have a longer course online on our website. It's an open course, so you can just follow the course on our website. We will share a link with you at the end of the webinar. So moving on from the introduction to development to the call for proposals itself, some of the information I'll just highlight that's already on the website, but I won't go into details. So you know that the call is for projects that address a challenge, one or more challenges related to development, some of the challenges that Tawanda just talked about, and the proposal has to use astronomy to address the challenge. So therein comes the name Astronomy for Development. We always say at the office, astronomy for development is about people. It's not about the stars. It's not about astronomy itself. Astronomy is just a tool that we employ in order to drive sustainable development. What projects can apply for this call? It's a question we often receive from potential applicants. Like I said before, any project that will have an impact on development using astronomy. So that's a very broad definition. If I can answer some specific questions that we have received before, can you apply for a astronomy education or outreach project? Can you get funding for this kind of project? So the end goal should be sustainable development. So if you're trying to get funding for purely astronomy education or outreach project, then the OAD call will not be suitable. But if you're using astronomy education or outreach in order to promote development, then yes, then definitely you can apply. So what I mean here is that the educational activity or outreach activity is just a medium, it's just a tool that you're using in order to create some positive impact on development. So I'll get into that later in my presentation. Similarly, can you apply for astronomy training projects? The answer to the question is very similar to the first question. You can apply for a project if the end goal is development. So as I said at the very beginning, we are not in the business of training people to pursue an education in astronomy. Our end goal is not to create more astronomers in the world, but if you can show in your proposal that you're having a substantial impact on development by using some astronomy based training, then yes, the proposal would be eligible. Can you apply to buy a telescope? Unfortunately, we our project grants, they are quite small, small to medium, so we haven't funded many types of infrastructure projects before, and I don't expect that to change unless we have a substantial increase in our funding. People have got small telescopes and small instruments in the past, but again, the goal is to use that instrument in a way as to promote sustainable development. So in your proposal, you have to justify why you need this instrument, why that's the most suitable way in order to drive development, in order to impact on the target audience. The total budget for this call is 120,000 euros, typically split between 15 to 20 projects. So that gives you an idea of the grant amount per project. Most projects we fund for 1 year. This year we started accepting proposals for multi-year projects. But the point here is that your project must be multi-year by design. What this means is we are not looking for proposals that simply repeat the same activity year after year, right? So if you're running an activity at a school, then you can't apply for a multi-year proposal to run the same activity over 2 or 3 years. But if you can justify why you want to run that activity over multiple years, if you can prove that you're creating additional value by extending the project to more than 1 year, then you can apply for a multi-year proposal. Just a few pointers. The first, most important one is propose a project that responds to a need in your community, not a project you want. We have seen in the past that many applicants apply for an idea or project that they are passionate about, something they might have been doing on their own with their own resources and funding for many years, and now they want to expand that idea. But before you do that, just ask yourself, what need in the community is it responding to? Are people going to benefit directly from this project, or are there ways in which you can maybe modify the idea, or maybe apply, use a different idea, a different project that can straight away benefit your target audience. Number 2 would be pick few SDGs. So some applicants pick lots of SDGs, but I think it's better to pick fewer SDGs and try to focus on them, and also look at the SDG indicators. So there are 17 SDGs, and under each SDG, there are lots of indicators. I think there are like 200 indicators in total. So the indicators are more specific, and it'll give you a better sense of how your project relates to that SDG. Number 3 would be to check what has been done before by other people around the world, by people in astronomy, people in other fields. Make sure that you're learning from what has been done before. You could, in fact, repeat a project that has been done before, but make sure that you justify why the same project is being repeated. Maybe it's being repeated because you're targeting a different target audience, a different region, or something else. And the last point goes without saying that your proposal must be flexible enough so that it can adapt to the changing situation, the global situation we're in right now. Okay, so I'll just quickly take you through this slide that explains different concepts that you need while developing an application. So at the top, you'll see inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impact. So I'll just try to explain the difference between all these terms and some of the common errors that people make while creating their application. The first one, inputs, is of course the resources, human resources, financial resources that you will need to invest in your project. Number 2, activities, again self-explanatory. It's just the actions, the activities that you'll carry out using those inputs that I just mentioned. Number 3, outputs. We call them deliverables in our project proposal. So these are the products that you create from the activity. Again, it's very, very simple to grasp. Could be lectures, videos you create, curriculum resources you create, the workshops you organize, and so on. So these 3, inputs, activities, and outputs, we have seen that most people are comfortable listing them in their proposal, and most proposals, I think, sort of tick all 3 boxes. But the next one, outcomes, usually is missing from many proposals. So an outcome is the change that is produced by your activity. So if you're doing an educational activity at a school level, maybe you're running a series of workshops at a school, and over 6 months or 1 year, you run, let's say, 20 workshops. So the outputs would be the lesson plans that you create, the number of students that you reach, the workshops themselves are outputs or deliverables, right? But the outcomes are what we are interested in at the end of the day. So the outcome is, what change are you expecting the students to have? What change are you interested in? What change do you want to create by running this project, by running this activity? That is what we are most interested in. So people usually sort of miss this box, miss this information when writing a proposal. So I would even say, when you're thinking through a project design, you must start from number 4, outcomes. So think of the change that you want to create in your target audience. So think of a problem that you want to solve. Then how do you want to change the situation? So what is the ideal in that situation? How do you want it to be changed? And then, in order to create the change, what outputs do you need, and what activities need to be organized? And then you come to what inputs do you need from us in order to create that outcome. So I would encourage all applicants to think from an outcomes-oriented perspective, rather than start with what you have and then try to figure out which outcomes are the most suitable for that activity. So the last one that I didn't talk about is impact. Impact is much harder to measure. I don't think any of our projects have measured impact. It's not something we have asked before, but an impact is basically which of these outcomes from the previous column can be in fact attributed to your project activity. We live in a very complex world. Lots of external factors might be influencing the change as well. Going back to that example of the school activity, there might be an improvement in students' learning outcomes at the end of your program, but how much of that can you attribute to your program, and how much of that is due to some other external factors? Maybe the students got a new teacher the same year that you ran the program, so maybe some of the improvement in learning outcomes is due to the new teacher who teaches better. So things like that. So impact is not very important for now, but outcome is definitely important. So just be aware of the difference between outcomes versus outputs and outputs or deliverables. And the last point I want to touch on is make sure to explain the relationship between the input and the activities and the outcomes. So if you say that you want to improve learning outcomes by running a 6-week workshop or 6-month workshop, then make sure you explain how you get from that activity to the outcome, because it's not always self-evident. So lots of people target SDG 4 education, for example, and in the proposal might say, oh, we are running 10 workshops this year, and obviously it improves SDG 4. It is definitely not obvious. So you have to make a strong case for why those 6 workshops or 10 workshops will affect the SDG 4, will in fact produce a positive outcome. So while trying to link together the outcomes and the activities, I would urge you again to go back to the SDG indicators, look at the indicators, and then figure out which activity is necessary in order to produce those outcomes. So let me stop here. For questions, maybe we can take 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll move on to the panel. Okay, I'm just picking up questions that my colleagues have copied from the chats. The first one is, what is SDG? So SDG is the Sustainable Development Goals. These are the 17 goals decided upon by the UN a few years ago. So these are the goals for the whole planet, for the whole world, basically. You can just look up the SDGs. Okay, I'm just picking up a question that's at the bottom of my chat. Which type of organizations or individuals can apply? Anyone can apply, so you don't need non-profit status. You don't need to be working at an astronomy institution. You can apply on your own, just one person. Although I would strongly discourage that, because it's better to have a strong team of people behind the project. Okay, let's see. Can projects target any of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or are there certain SDGs that will be given preference? So in the past, most of our projects have targeted SDG 4, which is education. I think it's easy to connect astronomy to education-related goals, but we have also had projects that targeted SDG 16, which is for peace and social justice, SDG number 8 for decent work and economic growth. So we don't have any specific SDGs as a focus. In fact, if you're really innovative, that might actually work in your favor. If you target an SDG that's never been targeted by any of our projects before, that might be an advantage to your application. On our website, you can actually select projects by SDG and see which SDGs have been impacted by projects and which SDGs have not been impacted by any projects. Okay, there's a very long question. I'll just take this one and then stop. I would like to know if the project referees are familiar with the local context. Oftentimes, there are very specific details in the proposals that matter for local context. Yeah, that's a very good point. So what we do, in fact, is that when we receive your applications, we first send it to our regional offices. So the OAD has 11 regional offices around the world, covering a substantial part of the planet. So we send it to them first for their input. They don't evaluate your application, but they only give feedback on what you have exactly said on whether the proposal is relevant in terms of a local context, whether it makes sense in terms of their local context, and then we send it to the reviewers for evaluation with the feedback from the regional offices. Okay, there's a few more questions, but in the interest of time, let me stop here. And if there is time at the end of the session, we can come back to those. Now, I would like to ask the panelists to switch on your video. I hope you can. Ah, perfect. Awesome. Can you unmute? Perfect. Thanks. Thanks again, everyone, for joining today. Okay, let's just start with maybe a round of introductions. Very briefly, please introduce yourself, and also maybe very briefly, like in 1 minute, what project are you running for the OAD? Let's start with Salman Hamid, because you're on top of my screen.
Okay, well, thank you very much to be part of it. My name is Salman Hamid. I am a professor at Hampshire College in the US, but I run a nonprofit that makes videos in astronomy for audiences in Pakistan in Urdu and /Hindi. And the project that we have is to create videos for 5th to 8th grade kids. Those videos will be in Urdu, and these will be part of a new school, teleschool on television that the government started for COVID, in response to COVID. So these videos are going to be aired on television for mostly unprivileged kids, and also they will also be available on YouTube. So, and I can talk more about it later if we talk about which SDG it falls under and things like that.
Thanks. Yasmin?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Yasmin Catricheo. I am from Chile, but I live in the United States in Washington, D.C. I work at Associated University Things, and I am a physics educator. I am the CEO and president of Hanekeo Foundation, which is located in Chile, in the south of Chile. And we had a project that's been funded by the OED. It's called RITA, which is Rediscovering Astronomy, Identity Through Astronomy. This is a project is trying to unify 3 original students from original community from Chile. So it's Pascuense, which is Easter Island, Mapuche, we're located in the south of Chile, and Liganantay, which is in the north of Chile. So we have a teacher and a group of students. They are doing a research, and they get together once a month to discuss the results of the question they are investigating. And all this is related to astronomy. So we're using astronomy to unify and get students from indigenous people to get together. And one of the ideas also is come up with a network. So students, they will see there is another students like themselves in another part of the country and come up with a possible network for them.
Thank you, Yasmin. Anne?
Hi everyone, my name is Anjeri. I'm Kenyan, but currently in the UK. I'm in my final year of my PhD at the Georgia Bank Center for Astrophysics. So my project, I'm a team leader of one of the projects funded by OAD last year, that is Elimisha Msichana, Elimisha Jamii, which is Swahili for Educate a Girl, educate the entire community. And one of our main overarching objective for this project is to ensure 100% transition of the girls who go through this project for between primary education and secondary education. We know that most girls schooling in rural African, countries or areas, they do not get to complete secondary education due to various socioeconomic challenges such as poverty and therefore lack of school fees or early marriages or teenage pregnancies. So the main aim for this Elimisha Msichana, Elimisha Jamii is that we're providing mentorship, we're providing long-term monitoring of these girls who go through this project, and we're using astronomy in a fun way to engage the students themselves, to engage the parents, and we hope that once they go through this project or through this program, is that they actually get to complete secondary education. So that's our main objective. And again, also involving secondary school girls in their first year and the second year of secondary school education, because we are trying to use, again, astronomy to encourage them to pick up STEM subjects, because statistics show that girls tend not to shy away from physics, especially from the final years of high school and beyond. So we are just trying to encourage more girls to engage in STEM subjects, hoping that maybe 3-4 years later, we'll have more students or girls engaging in STEM subjects in secondary schools and colleges and beyond. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Michelle?
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me to participate to this webinar. With my colleague Jean-Pierre de Greve and other colleagues now from Nigeria, Zambia, and South Africa, we have developed a project whose name is Astrolab, that is brings the light into the university for undergraduate students. And astronomy is used to develop hands-on activity at the university level, where the undergraduate students in sciences learn to plan and to perform real-time observations with a remote telescope, and then, of course, to transform these observations by measuring the data into scientific results in order to learn what is a measure, what is an error bar, how to understand the quality of measurements, how to understand not only the quality of the measurements, but what is a real activity close to the research activity, which can be developed in any industrial domain during their life. And it's free because we are providing a free access to Las Cumbres Observatory, a remote telescope. It's 40 centimeters telescope all around the world, available 24 hours for 24 hours every night or every day around the world. And through application, it's free. And we have been providing manual guiding, and we have been setting up workshops to train our colleagues in Africa. Many colleagues have a strong background, but in theoretical astronomy and not at all in practical astronomy. And the idea of Astrolab is to allow students to manipulate the data, real images, real data obtained by themselves, that we know that in many universities to have real practical activities is very costly, because you need to buy something, you need to maintain the equipment, and this is very costly. Here, due to the fact that we have access to remote telescope, it's totally free, but the students work on their own data that they have been taken. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. My question to all the panelists, anyone can answer, is how would you explain astronomy for development? What did you think when you first heard of this term? And what do you think now? What is astronomy for development to you? Yes.
Thank you. Well, I will say that astronomy for development, you can use it as a tool for so many things, like, for example, do education, to come up with science for diplomacy, use astronomy to bring communities, countries together. You can use example for the black hole picture. That is, there wasn't just one country, there wasn't just one team working for that. There were so many all around the world. So we need to have that unification and be on the same page, all working together to come up with the big discoveries. Also, astronomy can help a community that is in poverty, right? We can look at the sky. So there is information and there's things that we can use for that, and just share that with the community, and we can use this as a touristic way to bring more people to my place. If I have, for example, if I live in the mountains and I have cabins, right? So I can say, you can come and stay with us, and also at nighttime we look at the sky and we talk about the constellations. So plus just not being here and going around for hikes, you will learn about astronomy. And I think one of the most important for me when I am starting learning about this is science for diplomacy. I think it's just so beautiful that we can have a common sense of humanitarian. We all look at the sky. We all the cultures and countries around the world have been impacted by not looking at the sky, but observing of the sky, and not just observing, also connecting with them. And based on that observation, all of original people around the world were able to move forward. They use the sky to say, okay, when I'm gonna go to get the fruits from the land, when I need to travel, where I can go. So astronomy for development is a powerful tool that we can use to help our community and help our neighbor, our people, and also create network to do bigger things.
Thank you for that. Michelle?
Yes, in the domain of Astrolab, I would say that astronomy for development is the opportunity to show to the students that the laws they have been learning at school and at university, or sometimes boring laws, physical laws or laws in chemistry, can be applied to the whole universe, of course, in different situations of density, of magnetism, of size, and so on. But these are the same laws. And sometimes, thanks to Einstein, of course, the laws may be refined. The gravitational laws has been expanded and refined. But in most of the cases, the students can apply the basic laws that they know to measure the mass and the radius of star, not speaking of the exoplanet. And it's totally exciting, absolutely exciting. And also, as Jasmine has said just before, it covers the domain of diplomacy for many, many reasons. Looking at where the large observatories are set up, they are set up because thousands of countries are linked together to build it, and then it's open to everybody. But much more important, the database in astronomy are free. They are open to anyone. You will tell me, well, okay, I must know what to do with this. But in many, many cases, at the very beginning at the university, you can use, for example, the database of Gaia, which is a small, very small European experiment, but which has been able to measure billions of stars in our galaxy. And it's free access. You have access to the distance of the star. You know, it's totally free. In one click, you have access to it. So, well, that's why I think it's really worthwhile to be taught in that way, astronomy for development, to show how the community can work together.
Yes. And I also have to point out that the projects that we have funded in the past, they only represent a very small fraction of the potential that astronomy for development has. You would have seen on the website this year, we have a list of themes for the call for proposals. So one of the themes in the call is technical projects, which we have not funded before at all. So there's a huge opportunity for ideas and new projects. Salman?
Yeah, thank you. And I would say, I think that toughest part, and that's part about writing the proposal as well, and that is this switch from the development of astronomy to astronomy for development. And so thinking, so that's a different frame. Oftentimes people who are involved in astronomy are trained to think that we want to promote astronomy. How do we get to more people? How do we get more people interested in the sciences as well? But for astronomy for development, in my understanding of it, you have to change that frame. And you have to really show in your proposal that how astronomy is being used for the development perspective. So even if you're doing the same thing, like, you can argue that by getting people more interested in astronomy, will get them more interested in science. For the proposal aspects, I think you have to be clear that the goal, for example, is how science is important for development and how astronomy can lead to science. Right. So, I think that framing has to be very clear. And I think as others have mentioned as well. So if you're thinking in terms of how image from space, or sort of like, looking at our perspective can lead to space diplomacy. And again, it has to be very clear that it's not about the wonder part, which is wonderful, but it's not the wonder part that is the goal. It's what comes out of wonder, how it helps. I think that is what astronomy for development is. And I think that distinction would be, my guess would be very crucial for whether a proposal gets supported by OAD or not.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. So let me ask this then. When you applied for the proposal last year, what part of the proposal did you find most challenging? Could be something to do with the conception of your idea, or maybe something a challenge that you faced while writing. Any difficulty that you can think of that might be useful for others to hear about? Yes, please. Salman?
Yeah, okay, so if I can just one or two things very quickly. I think it goes back to this issue of how to think in writing the proposal. And the last few slides were about the outcomes and the impact. I think thinking about these output, outcome, and impact, the differentiation between those three, I think those are, I find them challenging. I find them hard to really think through and to differentiate between them. There is a logical connection to it, but I think writing the proposal on how you are going to measure an impact, that's pretty challenging, right? I mean, so what we are trying to do is to have a focus group, for example, because our videos are going to be on television. Okay, so yeah, so you can have some numbers of how many people viewed it. Does that make an impact? So we are trying to do focus groups after they air and things like that, which is a very hard thing, like for other purposes. But all I'm trying to say is, like, that's, I found that how do you meaningfully measure the impact was the most challenging part to write about.
Thank you. Yasmin?
Thank you. Well, I was going to say that I think also one of the most challenging part of it is what just Salman say, right? To try to think about what is the difference between these two concepts, and also how I'm going to put those in the proposal. Also, I think one key tip that I will give to the people is that to come up with an idea for the proposal, I think it's very, very important to know your community. And to know your community from your own experience. I think when people come up with programs and projects, but they are not part of that community they want to help, or they're never lived there, or they don't have like a strong connection, it's more hard to come up with a proposal that is strong enough that you can really, that the people review and they say, yeah, this person really understands this community. And from that perspective, we can see they has an idea how to support them and how to help them. And also it has to be something that really you're passionate about it, something that you also really believe that is going to help the community, and it's going to help them to grow and learn from astronomy and use astronomy as a tool for development in so many ways. Yeah,
that's absolutely right. Like I said, in the past, we have seen proposals that don't respond to a need, but it's a project that a person wants to run because they did it in the past, or they're interested in the idea. But it's so important to actually find out what the target audience needs and then propose a project to respond to that. Before I come to you, Michelle, just a point for Anne. I know we have talked about how COVID impacted your project in the past, so maybe you can give an answer to that. I'll go to Michelle first, but you can think about it, and then I'll come back to you, Anne. Michelle?
Okay, yes, I would like to come back on the impact, which has been underlined by Salman previously. It may be one of the most difficult points to answer, mainly if your proposal is acting in the domain of education, because impact, well, what we have been doing this year. For example, the students were very much excited to measure the mass with the Kepler laws and something like that of stars, and understanding a period, phase, and whatever it is. But what does it change in their mind for the coming years during their studies? It's extremely difficult for us to send email, you know, at this level, at the level of OAD. So impact can be very, very, very difficult to measure, not only for the students, but also for the tutors. We have been organizing training for tutors, you know, previously, and this year by Zoom. But, you know, the development of the Astrolab and UN's activity in university, you need to have it written down in the curricula. And sometimes it is very easily accepted, some not. Sometimes you have to go back. It can be offered only the work to be done during 1 month during the year. So the impact can be or can't be measured very efficiently, such as it has been developed previously in the non-social science. So what to do with this, but it must be taken into account.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. You know, most of the people running the projects are astronomers or people working in astronomy, and we are not experts in development, which is fine. You know, you don't need to be an expert in development. You can get a partner, a collaborator who knows that side, that field of work. I see the astronomy for development work as something that contributes to the larger field of development, and also that sets an example to the other sciences that, you know, science can directly impact on development. We don't need to wait 20 years for a spin-off product or you know, some commercial company to develop a product from a basic science breakthrough. Let me go back to Anne on the impact of COVID. We are all still in the middle of it, as it seems. So in the, you know, by the situation now, what would you say? How has your project adapted to COVID? What have you been doing in Kenya?
Okay, thanks, Rama. So first and foremost, before I get into this, I would just like to reiterate, like, for me, when I was making this, when I was writing this proposal, it was the first time I was making such an application. And just to reiterate what Yasmin has said, you have to be very passionate, and you have to be, you know, aware of the community where you want to implement your project. So you have to know your community. And as a first-time applicant, you should at least maybe carry out a pre-feasibility study of whatever the region or the community where you want to implement your project, or at least you have tried to implement this project before, even with any funding or without any funding, so that when you come and you're writing this proposal, you have a very clear picture of what you want to do, of your objectives. And when you have that clear picture, I think it might be a bit easier for you to, you know, vision the outputs that are expected, or the impact that you're going with the project is going to have on the community. So first and foremost, familiarize yourself with the community, carry out pre-feasibility study, and again, just engage the community beforehand so that you have a clear picture. For us, with regards to COVID situation, the COVID situation in Kenya is not that bad as compared to most places. And so after 1 year of school break last year, once the outbreak happened sometime in March, so the schools were closed until this year, January. So the schools resumed this year, January, where we have school learning in schools have resumed. And so for us, we've been lucky because we've been able to implement our project, because our project involves engaging many students, a lot of teachers. And so we've been able to carry out our projects, that is a mentorship program and outreach activities by visiting schools. So what happens is, before we would engage like a large number of students at any given go, but for now we're just trying to focus on the exact target group that we had stated before, though. So when we visit the schools, we normally want to engage the girls in the final year of the primary education, and we normally bring in girls from maybe the next 2-3 classes below. But now this year we just had to focus on, say, maybe the 100 girls in the final year of the primary education, and we've followed the guidelines laid by the government. We've also provided masks and hand sanitizers, and of course ensured social distancing during this event. So basically, we are just implementing these projects following the guidelines that have been set for schools to ensure that we curb the spread of the virus during the delivery of our activities.
Thanks, Anne. Any of the other panelists want to add to that question about how your project is adapting to the changing COVID situation? What plans did you have in place at the time of proposal? Yes, Yasmin.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I think most of the projects are being affected by COVID all around the world. I think something that I've been learning during this time running these projects for Hanekeo Foundation is that you need to relax. One of the things is that if you are the person who's running the project, you need to realize there are some factors and some factors that you can manage, and they're not on your hands. So it's not that you can decide what to do and how things are gonna move. For example, in Chile, they've been quarantine for so long, and each quarantine is like a whole month. They can go out, they can just, and the only stores that are open is just drugstores and like supermarkets. And then when the quarantine is over, we say, okay, now we're ready, we're gonna go and we're gonna do this and that, and then again, we're ready with everything all planned, and then quarantine again. And I am like, no, what I'm gonna say to the OAD, they're gonna say that we're not doing our project, we're not moving forward. And it's not like that. I think I've been learning that there are a lot of other factors that you can manage. So you need to relax and just try to do your best, because any project that you're doing and you're running, especially during this time, is gonna be, whenever you can make it happen, it's gonna be really good for the community you're trying to help. And also just have in mind that the OAD is super open, they're super supportive, and they know as long as you have communication, they really understand what is happening, what is your specific situation, and they help you in so many different ways so that you are able and you're relaxed and you can manage your project the best way possible.
Yeah, thanks Yasmin. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we only do the job of coordination. All our projects are run by volunteers, and we completely, are supportive of our volunteers. This is such an exceptional situation. There's very few things you can do about it. Any other panelists have comments on the COVID factor? Yes, Anne?
Yeah, if I may just add, is that one of the most amazing things that has happened is because we had to develop the curriculum for our AstroSTEM workshops and mentorship. And one of the most amazing things that has happened is that, so I'm dealing with a village that is very rural, like very remote, that even getting access to internet is a huge challenge. But to be amazed that we've been able to engage with the teachers remotely. So we normally have Zoom meetings every now and then. So I find it to be amazing that even some of them commented that this is the first time they're having a remote meeting or a Zoom meeting. So my advice would be, don't assume that even with COVID, it might be difficult to implement this project. You will be surprised what we are capable of, so long as you have that vision. And you will be able to achieve whatever it is you want to achieve. So don't assume that it might be difficult to carry out these activities because of COVID. You can engage people from wherever they are, and I'm sure you'll be very surprised. It doesn't matter where they're located. Yeah.
For sure. Salma?
Yes, apropos of Anne, I think I would actually a little bit, not to say that COVID is a good thing, but I'm just saying that sometimes there can be positives as well. And I think now we have gotten so much used to Zoom. I mean, I just remember a year ago, it was so hard, what's happening? I'm on mute and things like that. And now things have gotten much more smoother. So like the project that we are doing, the videos are being produced in Pakistan and some of it is in the US. I'm making videos here. But we are meeting every day pretty much across Zoom, and we have gotten into a rhythm of it. And I think our expectations are different and they have adjusted to a new world. So rather than thinking, oh, we'll have to be at the same place meeting together to do that, we don't even assume that. And now it's kind of like, I think in the long run, for the long-term sustainability to a certain degree, I think it has set up there is a positive aspect to it that now we can do remote conversations much more comfortably and can be in a rhythm as a team, even if we are not in the same place. So not that we want COVID, but there are one or two positive things too.
Yeah, and even in places that typically don't have internet, have been able to run projects successfully. One of our projects is based in a remote part of the Amazon, and they just installed satellite internet in a remote village just last week. That's an amazing outcome on its own for a project. And even for other projects where there's no internet access, no signal whatsoever, they have produced completely offline solutions that that might not have happened otherwise. So people are really adapting to the situation. People are always resilient. So with that, maybe I will close, because I see we are 8 minutes past the hour, and I don't want to keep everyone here for longer than that. So thank you again to the panelists. Thank you to the participants. So to all those who registered for the webinar, we'll send you an email later today or maybe tomorrow with a link to the recording and maybe a bunch of other links that we copied on the chat. We'll send it to you in the email. And of course, if anyone has questions, you can always contact us at info@astrofordev.org. Thanks again. And if people have questions, contact us at any time. Thanks to the panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.